We expect to demonstrate that Wisconsin's refusal to allow marriages or to recognize out-of-state marriages of gay and lesbian couples violates the fundamental right to marry, as well as the equal protection guarantee of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. The 8 plaintiffs in our cases, 6 of whom are here today, will speak shortly. They include an accountant, a steel handler for a manufacturing company, a college director of human resources, a retired city clerk, an editor, a customer service agent, a university dean, a retired English professor, and minister. Most have been together for decades, and some are raising or have raised children together. The plaintiffs in our lawsuit include Roy Badger and Garth Blonde, Judy Tramp and Katie Haining, and Charvon Kemp and Marie Carlson. These couples are being denied the basic protections afforded by marriage. They only want what every married couple wants, to express their love, commitment in front of friends and family, and the security and dignity that marriage provides. And I want to turn it over now to Katie and Judy first.
Good afternoon. I'm Judy Tramp, and this is my partner, Katie Haining. Katie and I met 30 years ago working at summer camp while we were still in college. We dated for a number of years, and then we decided we would move in together. This summer, we will be celebrating our 25th anniversary as a couple. Marriage is important to us for many reasons. One reason is for the ability to care for one another, no matter what happens. In 2002, Katie had a seizure while we were traveling, and my authority to make medical decisions on Katie's behalf was challenged by the hospital because we were not married. And we were not blood relatives. Even though we'd been in a committed relationship for over 10 years at the time, the hospital felt Katie's brother, whom she hadn't seen since she was a child, should be making the decisions and not me.
We are in love and have made a commitment. Through thick and thin, we have been there for each other. Through the death of our parents, through buying our house, through remodeling our house, through illnesses, and through various surgeries. We have turned to each other for love, for support, for understanding, and for care. We have been, and we are, responsible for each other and understand what commitment means. And yet, because of a state law, we and thousands of other loving couples are being denied the freedom to marry. We would like others to know that being gay doesn't mean that you aren't in love or that you aren't willing to make this type of commitment. Marriage is about taking care of each other throughout life, and it's a public commitment that we want to make. We love each other, and denying us the freedom to marry just doesn't seem right. Thank you.
Charvon and Marie are next.
Good afternoon. My name is Marie Carlson, and this is my partner, Charvon Kemp. I feel so lucky to have found a partner that I have not only been in love with for going on 8 years now, but have had the great fortune to create a life and raise children into wonderful human beings with. My relationship with Charvon has been the most rewarding relationship I've ever had. The normal next step for people would be to get married, which is what Charvon and I have wanted to do for years, but the state that we live in says that it's not allowed. I believe that we should be allowed to marry the person that we're in love with. And, sorry about that. And we deserve the freedom to do so. We now have an opportunity to fight to make that change, and we intend to fight as far as we have to go until there's the day that I can walk down the aisle with my partner and my love and marry her legally.
I'm Charvon Kemp, and I've been with Marie now going on 8 years. We have built a relationship of trust, honesty, mutual respect, love, and integrity. I can't think of a more perfect person to spend the rest of my life with. stand here today fighting for freedom to marry the person I love, fighting the law that keeps us from doing what other couples have the right to do, get married. Sure, I can leave the state of Wisconsin and get married elsewhere. I could move to a more accepting state, but I work here, our children are here, my friends and family are here, my life is here, and I should have the right to marry where I live. I simply want the same protections that other couples are granted through marriage. I simply want the freedom to legally marry the person that I love. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Garth Blonde, and my partner of 37 years, Roy Badger, and I live in Milwaukee. Roy and I met in 1976. We dated and got to know each other for 8 months, and then on November 7th of 1976, we sat down, discussed our feelings, and on that night we made a commitment to each other. And we used that date as our anniversary date. Sometimes people ask us where we come up with that date, and that is why. In 2009, after 33 years together, Roy and I became licensed domestic partners under Wisconsin law. While domestic partnership offers some benefits, in reality, it's not a legalized, recognized marriage. And this certainly struck home when I developed lung cancer 2 years ago. It resulted in surgery, and fortunately, Roy and I had medical power of attorney drawn up. I developed some serious complications, which resulted in me slipping into a coma for 4 weeks with 3 serious episodes where they had to call the family and say, do you want us to turn off the machine? Out of the goodness of his heart, Roy included my father in discussions with the medical team when they would get a call like that. Unfortunately, my father thought that he, not Roy, had the right to make my medical choices for me. We later discovered that when I was in the coma, my father wanted to take me off life support. Roy did not. Even though my surgeon felt confident that I would pull through, my dad still wanted the machine shut off. He did not think I would pull through. My dad even went so far as to seek legal action to strip Roy of his powers for medical power of attorney. Obviously, Roy championed it, and he won the battle. If we had been legally married, no one would have even questioned Roy's involvement as my spouse. In this case, our being denied the freedom to marry was literally a near case of life and death. Very close. I want to do my part to correct this injustice. Wisconsin has been my home for my entire life. I love this state. And all I want is to have my love for my partner validated as we head into the twilight of our lives. Time's clicking after 37 years. There's some time that's gone by now, so I would like to see that happen. So, thank you.
My name is Roy Badger, and I have been truly blessed to be the partner of Garth Blonde for the past 37 years. We have lived here in the great state of Wisconsin for our entire lives. We have been property owners in Milwaukee County for most of our time together. We have spent our time as any other couple. We've mowed grass, shoveled too much snow, gone grocery shopping, attended church, rooted for the Brewers and Packers. We've done volunteer work for many organizations. Just like other families, the only difference is because we are the same sex. Wisconsin denies us the freedom to marry. We have always had to hide our love and commitment for each other. When we first got together in the 1970s, banks would not even allow us to get a joint checking account. It is much easier today, but we still must lie and file taxes as single adults. It hurts me that Garth and I are denied the same benefits and protections that my legally married friends, relatives, and coworkers enjoy. In many cases, Garth and I have been together much longer than they have, yet because we're the same sex, we're treated as second-class citizens. Several years ago, I almost lost Garth to cancer. In the emotional time before surgery, we had to go running around drawing up legal papers to protect ourselves from all possible outcomes, something legally married couples take for granted. Now we face another battle. Garth lost his full-time job last year when his company had a mass layoff. Even though I have been a full-time worker for the state of Wisconsin since 1981, Garth had to accept COBRA insurance, and just this month wiped out our savings. We have been a couple since November of 1976. Why must we continue to fight for our freedom to marry? We have witnessed the progress made in other states, and we believe now is the time for equality to come to Wisconsin, the state we love and live in. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is John Knight. I'm a staff attorney with the LGBT project of the ACLU, and I am thrilled to be a part of this case representing these wonderful plaintiffs and these couples seeking the freedom to marry. Nationally, we've seen an outpouring of support for treating loving, committed, same-sex couples fairly by recognizing that they too should have the freedom to marry. Support in Wisconsin has grown too, where polling indicates majority support. Moreover, denying lesbian and gay couples the freedom to marry violates the fundamental constitutional rights we have as Americans. For that reason, the ACLU has made this work a priority nationally, where we have lobbied state legislatures, waged ballot campaigns, and filed lawsuits. We're counsel now in 6 federal lawsuits seeking the freedom to marry, including Wisconsin. Those states also include Pennsylvania, Virginia, North Carolina, Ohio, Oregon, and I started to mention Wisconsin again. It's so exciting. We're also counsel in a lawsuit in Utah on behalf of same-sex couples who were married there after the judge's favorable decision, representing them because the state is now seeking to undo those marriages to treat them as though they never happened. We're assisting in an additional federal case in Michigan. Wisconsin's ban is especially egregious. First, its constitution bans marriage and anything substantially similar, such as full civil unions. Second, Wisconsin law criminalizes leaving the state to marry if the marriage is prohibited or void in Wisconsin. Together, these laws force same-sex couples to choose between missing out on federal spousal protections or leaving the state and facing the risk of criminal prosecution with penalties up to $10,000 and 9 months in prison. As a result, Wisconsin's law is uniquely harmful to same-sex couples. These couples standing before you are fighting for one of the most personal and important choices we can make in life. Our choice to fall in love, form a family, and commit ourselves to one special person for life. The government has no business denying that freedom to loving same-sex couples, and we're confident that the courts will agree that doing so violates the U.S. Constitution. Thank you. I think at this point we intend to open up for questions.
The marriage evasion law that you were just talking about, how common is that in other states, and in Wisconsin, has that ever been enforced?
I'm not aware of any enforcement. It is unique. There is no other evasion statute like that with that kind of a penalty.
What's the likely time frame for this going forward? Your lawsuit is asking for an immediate halt to the continued enforcement of the ban.
We would like to move the case as quickly as possible. For one thing, the couple who is not here today has actually left the state to marry, so they do face that risk. And it is, notwithstanding the fact that prosecutions have not happened, it is a real risk, and so we want to protect them, and we're concerned about that.
John, the 59% of the voters ratified this. What does this say to them, this lawsuit?
We believe that, I mean, that was a number of years ago, but certainly it is, if it's unconstitutional, even then that law was unconstitutional. It's simply time to challenge this ban on a fundamental freedom such as the freedom to marry.
We don't, in other contexts, we don't put the fundamental freedoms of individuals up to a vote of the majority. Our Constitution protects liberty and equality, regardless of whether a majority agrees with that or not.
What prompted the timing of the lawsuit? I mean, was it the Windsor decision or some of the decisions that have happened in Utah and Oklahoma recently? Why now?
Well, I mean, obviously there has been momentum, and there's not really any question about that. And so I think Windsor obviously made a huge difference. And I think the climate in the country, I think the people are starting to recognize, I think we are achieving the point at which a majority is starting to see that this is the right thing to do. And we feel that Wisconsin should be part of that conversation as it goes forward.
Could you just expand a little bit more on what makes Wisconsin's law uniquely a problem, uniquely harmful to same-sex couples?
Well, it's, since the Windsor decision in June, couples throughout the country have been able to access federal protections even if their state did not allow them to marry. They can't access all federal protections, but many of them they can. In Wisconsin, they're put at this risk of saying, well, if I do that, I may end up in jail. So that is an unusual harm to people, to deny them not only the state protections, but as you know, there are many, many very important federal protections.
And I'm sorry, if you can just talk a little bit more about how Wisconsin's evasion law might differ from others. You said it was unique, but then I wasn't sure if you're just saying the penalties are especially harsh in Wisconsin. Do any other states have any kind of marriage evasion law?
I am not aware of any other state that has that kind of an evasion statute at this point that criminalizes leaving the state to marry.
There are civil evasion laws that essentially invalidate such a marriage, make it not recognized, but I'm not aware of a similarly punitive statute.
And how common are the civil
I'm not sure. I mean, I think there was a period of time in which it was relatively common to adopt those.
And do you know how old the criminalization in Wisconsin is when that statute was adopted?
Not off the top of my head. I'd have to look. It definitely predates, obviously, the amendment.
Sure.
Can I ask you, did you say that Wisconsin is one of 6 states that you currently have legislation to fight bans? Is that right?
Litigation.
Litigation.
I mentioned legislation where we've lobbied in a number of states, but in terms of litigation, it's 6 states.
So at some point, I guess, are all of those still in the formative stages? And at some point down the road, obviously this is going to go to one court, probably an appeal. Any chance that those 6 could get combined? And I know I'm looking a long time down the road here, but.
Well, we expect that this issue will end up in the U.S. Supreme Court very soon. Which of those cases goes to the U.S. Supreme Court is up in the air at this point. But you're right, there are a number of cases out there. They're all in different levels of progress. Some are further ahead in terms of the fact that some are already in the courts of appeals. But in terms of your question of whether they could be combined, that I can't see that being very likely.
And so if one is going to go, which one would you think would likely be?
Couldn't possibly say at this point.
What 6 states are you currently litigating in? You mentioned Pennsylvania.
Right, Pennsylvania, Virginia, North Carolina, Ohio, Oregon, and here in Wisconsin.
And then what's your involvement in Utah? I was a little confused about that.
Sorry, I'm certainly not very clear about it. So in Utah, people were allowed to marry, but then the state said we're not going to recognize those marriages. The federal government has actually said they are going to recognize those marriages for federal protection purposes, but the state government is not, and therefore we represent people challenging the state's effort to take those marriages away. Traditionally, when you're able to marry, you just can't take that away. It's a fundamental right that just can't be taken away that easily, or by fiat, as the state did.
There are 48 cases altogether in 20 states right now. Is that about right? Or are we 21? I think that's about the number.
There are many cases.
48 cases in what?
In 20 states. That includes both federal lawsuits in federal court and lawsuits in state courts.
And these are by different groups then, besides your group?
Some, they're, right.
In the 20 states
And private litigants as well, privately represented litigants.
So that includes Wisconsin in 20 states, or would this?
I think this is 21, but I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
I think that's exact. Sorry, there was another question.
Yeah, the state's Supreme Court still hasn't ruled on the legality of the domestic partner registry case. Can you see this having any effect on or being affected by what their ruling on that is?
It shouldn't. They're different issues.
Yeah, that's purely a question of what the state constitution allows or prohibits, whereas this is a question of what the U.S. Constitution allows or prohibits.
And when you listed out those numbers,
48 out of 20.
the 48 out of 21 are challenging what?
48 cases.
They're seeking the right to marry, the freedom to marry.
Do you have any statistics about how many people have gone out of state? How many people are breaking the law?
I'm not aware of those. No. Other questions? Questions for the plaintiffs?
Are any of the couples that are not married in other states that you're representing not getting married because of the fear of prosecution? Is that a factor for some?
You want to speak to that? I think.
Go ahead. Yes, in part that is a reason why. Because it is against the law in Wisconsin for us to go out of state and to be married and to come back in state. I really don't want to take the risk of finding out if we're going to be prosecuted or not, or in what county we go to if someone would decide to prosecute us versus another county. And so we have chosen not to get married because it's basically against the law in Wisconsin for us to go outside and do it. And my partner and I really are law-abiding citizens. We're not setting out to disobey laws in Wisconsin. We love each other very much and we want the freedom to marry, and we're not going to break the law in Wisconsin to do that.
And you're Judy, is that correct?
Yes, I'm Judy.
And exactly what Judy said, I have an issue with breaking the law in general. And we had talked about it for years about going ahead and leaving the state and going to Canada or go to Massachusetts. And each time I come back to, but it's not going to be legal here, and it's against the law, and you know how I feel about breaking the law. So that's not going to happen. We did finally, after the Windsor case, say, well, we can get federal benefits, and maybe we want to take that risk, and we actually discussed taking that risk. The timing of them contacting us about this case was actually around the same time we decided that maybe we will just go to Illinois. And when they approached us, we said, okay, you know what, this is doing exactly how we feel it should be done, and maybe we go here in Wisconsin so we can stay here, be legal here, and not worry about that.
What about a state where the marriage is legal and the couple later, one of them at least takes a job in Wisconsin, they move here? How does that law affect them?
Right now, they would not presumably be subject to the marriage evasion penalty because they did not leave Wisconsin to contract a marriage that is void or prohibited in Wisconsin. So there's no question. To me, I can't see a prosecutor finding a way to do that. So that situation should be safe. But of course, because Wisconsin doesn't have the freedom to marry, a lot of people are reluctant to come here who are in that situation. If they've got all of the protections and recognition and benefits in the state in which they were married and live, It's certainly a disincentive to come here and give up all of the state protections.
What is the penalty for violation of that marriage evasion statute?
It's up to 9 months imprisonment and or $10,000, up to $10,000.
One other comment about the question of people coming here who are already married. Even those people will not get all federal protections because some protections are determined based on whether your marriage is recognized in the state you reside. It's not a lot, but it's a few. Veterans benefits, I mean, some very important ones like veterans benefits and FMLA leave would not be enforceable if you live in a state that does not recognize your marriage.
Would you say getting back to the Supreme Court issue, is it plausible at the very least to say that the Supreme Court could take this up before we see any kind of ruling in this case in Wisconsin? Do you see it being that quickly when you talk about the Supreme Court?
It's very hard to say. I mean, there are some cases being briefed in the circuits, but to know exactly when those courts will decide is a guess that I can't make, because courts take months or as much as a year to decide a case. And this is obviously a very important case.
And not only that, but the U.S. Supreme Court has absolute discretion in what cases it takes and doesn't take. So they may well say that a case, even if there's a decision 2 weeks from now, and then a petition for cert, that process takes a while. But even then, they may just say, no, we want this to percolate, which is sort of a term that they use, interestingly.
Is there anything currently pending in the Seventh Circuit?
There is not. There is not. Any other questions?
Good luck.